Hello and welcome to today's lesson where we're looking at Mintzberg's 5 P's of strategy. So most people do strategy the wrong way. Most people and companies take a very simplistic approach to strategy development. Perhaps they brainstorm their way through a SWOT analysis, and then from this they try to plot their way immediately to world domination. Now, unfortunately, this very simplistic approach is one which is unlikely to give great results. To get your strategy right, you'll need to invest a lot of time into thinking about it and developing your strategy. Now, one of the main reasons why most people get strategy wrong is because they believe that strategy is about competing to be the best. It isn't. It's about competing to be unique. And this fact that most people get strategy wrong leads us nicely to Mintzberg's 5 P's of strategy. Now, Mintzberg recognized that strategy is a difficult thing to get right and that it takes deep thought and lots of time. And even if you do get it right, your strategy could be rendered obsolete overnight by a competitor. So to help you develop a better strategy, Mintzberg developed his 5 P's of strategy. And the 5 P's are simply 5 different viewpoints that you can look at your strategy from. Each P throws new light onto what strategy means from a different viewpoint. The idea is that by thinking about your strategy from 5 different perspectives, you'll get a more robust strategy than if you just use a couple of sentences to describe it. So what are the 5 P's? Well, they are that every strategy has a plan, every strategy has a ploy, every strategy has a pattern, a position, and a perspective. So let's examine each of these in turn. So firstly, a good strategy must have a plan, a course of action you intend to take, or a series of guidelines that you intend to follow. Now, the purpose of the plan is to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And planning is usually what comes to mind immediately when people think about strategy development. All plans have 2 characteristics. They are developed purposely and in advance. And planning is, of course, an essential part of strategy development, but on its own, it isn't enough to ensure you have a great strategy. That's why we have the other 4 viewpoints. Now, before we move on, just a quick word on tools. Each viewpoint has a number of tools you can use to help you develop that perspective further, and I'll show you what the tools are in each slide as we go through. But I'm not going to talk specifically about those tools, but what I will do is include a link to each of them below the video should you want to explore a tool in more detail. So the second viewpoint is ploy, and you can think of ploy as being something we do to get the better of a competitor. And of course, in business, there is no way to avoid competitors. So ploys are specific tactics to try and outsmart or disrupt what your competitor is doing. And examples of ploys include dropping prices to deter competitors, filing for patents, threatening legal action. And there's many more besides. So ploys tend to be short-term tactics, and a ploy or two can be a good thing. But it's important not to focus solely on your competitors so that you lose sight of your own long-term strategic plan. The third viewpoint is pattern. So where we are is we're saying that defining our strategy as a plan and a few ploys isn't enough. We also need to look at our behaviors. Now that makes sense because the output from strategy doesn't come from the plan or the ploy. It comes from the actions that we're going to take every day. So if we think about strategy as a pattern, it's about looking at what kind of behaviors have worked for us in the past, and then it's about deciding which of these patterns of behavior we want to continue or enhance or even stop doing. So you can think of the plan as being the intended strategy and the pattern as being the realized strategy, what we do every day. So as an example of a simple pattern, imagine if every decision throughout your organization was being made with your customer in mind. Now, this behavior will have already resulted in some great products in the marketplace, and as such, it's probably a behavior you'll want to keep and even articulate explicitly in your strategy. So the fourth viewpoint is position, and it's yet another way to define your strategy. Position tells you where you sit on the playing field relative to your competitors. So example positions include being the cheapest, having the most features, servicing a particular customer niche, having world-beating customer service. Position answers the question, how are we going to carve out a piece of the market for ourselves? And there will be pros and cons, of course, to each answer. So part of strategy development is to work through these pros and cons and make some deliberate decisions based on them. And the final viewpoint of the 5 Ps is perspective. Now, whilst position looks out to the world, perspective looks internally. Perspective looks at shaping the personality and culture of the organization. Your perspective will be set from how you view the marketplace and what you perceive it wants. So, for example, an accountancy firm's view of the world will be very different to a Silicon Valley high-tech startup's view. So, as an example, suppose you feel that your marketplace is relatively stable and wants the highest quality product. Now, in this scenario, you'll probably build your culture around high-quality execution and cost control. So conversely, in a new market where speed of product development is the most important factor, you'll need a different approach. In this case, you'll build your culture around rapid development and failing fast but moving forward. Now, in order for perspective to be useful, it needs to be shared by all members of an organization. It must also be lived by the actions that everyone in the organization takes every day. So because of this, a large part of senior management's job will be trying to make everyone share the same perspective. And this is usually done through sharing the vision and values of the organization, along with the roadmap to realize that vision. So let's look at an example. In this case, we're going to look at the 5 Ps as they apply to Apple. Now, of course, only Apple knows their own true strategy. So we're just using this simple example as a means to show the 5 Ps in action. So firstly, plan. So Apple's plan is to continue to consistently build the easiest to use and most intuitive consumer electronics. And whilst doing this, continue to expand their app ecosystem. Their ploy is based around Apple being frequently ahead of competitors in terms of innovation. Now, because of that, as a ploy, they're able to threaten to sue any competitors that might try to replicate or closely mimic their technology. In terms of pattern, Apple responds to the challenge of competition through innovation. Now, some of those innovations will be complete failures, but others are going to be great successes. In terms of position, Apple products are positioned at the high end. Their high quality, intuitive design, covering both hardware and software, is very difficult to compete against. And when we think about perspective, then one of Apple's values is think different. So its culture and personality is all about making the best products in the marketplace and doing so in an innovative way. So in summary, Mintzberg's 5 Ps of strategy gives us 5 viewpoints to examine any strategy to ensure its robustness. And we can summarize the 5 Ps as plan, and that's the plan by which the organization hopes to achieve its aims. Ploy, and that's a specific tactic or tactics to outwit a competitor. Pattern, and a pattern is something that highlights that strategy isn't an event, it's a consistent series of actions moving the organization towards its aims. Position, meaning the position of each product in the marketplace relative to competitors. And finally, perspective, and that's the organization's culture and personality, its way of getting things done. So that's it for today's lesson. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.